Today I am going to talk about Buddha nature. And the main source for this talk is the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. And this is an edition that has commentary by Thrangu Rinpoche. And the reason why I chose this book is that it is written by Gampopa, and Gampopa is really the father of the Kagyu lineage, in that he brought the lineage together, joining the Mahamudra teachings that he received from Milarepa, and goes back to Marpa, then Naropa and Talopa, together with the Kadampa teachings. And also, he is the first monk, the first monastic in the Kagyu lineage. And he was a prolific writer. He was a scholar. So his works helped form the Kagyu lineage. So this Jewel Ornament of Liberation is a seminal work of the Kagyus. And as I was looking for sources for this talk of Buddha nature, I realized very quickly that the very first chapter of the Jewel Ornament of Liberation is on Buddha nature. So Gampopa felt that it was so important that it should be first in his book. And this book does pretty much set out the whole Kagyu approach to Buddhism and to the path. So to put all that together, he feels that the beginning of the path is really understanding Buddha nature. And he refers to it in the first chapter as the primary cause. In other words, you cannot attain Buddhahood unless we have Buddha nature. That other spiritual traditions, like Christianity, for instance, feel that we are missing something that we need to receive from a higher power, a God in terms of the Christian religion. But here, it is not something that we need to receive that is outside of us, that we don't already have. It is something that we do have. And if we didn't have it, we couldn't be enlightened. So this is why it's the primary cause. And Gampopa uses a couple of examples of, or at least Thrangu Rinpoche does in his commentary, that one is sesame seeds. If you would look at sesame seeds, you might not realize that they have sesame oil in them. But all you have to do is press the sesame seeds and you can extract sesame oil. The other example is butter in milk. That if you churn it, the milk, you get butter. And he says then that you cannot get butter by churning water, and you can't get sesame oil by pressing sand. So this is how he approaches the Buddha nature, that it is present within us. It's not recognized. We're not really aware of it being there. And even though it is there, it takes work to realize that potential. Now, the Buddha's teachings on the Mahayana path state, excuse me, state that everything is empty of inherent existence. Things like our thoughts, our negativity, our conflicting emotions, all of these, because they are empty, they can be removed and they can be relinquished. They have no inherent nature of their own. And as a result of that, we really have nothing that limits us from realizing our full potential. And as the Buddha taught later on in his life, he actually gave teachings on emptiness. His first teachings on emptiness were the Heart Sutra, where he talked in terms of negation, not this, not that, and so forth. But later on, he talked about emptiness being the nature of clarity. From Thrangu Rinpoche's book, The Jewel Ornament of Liberation, quote, "Clarity, which is the quality of very vivid intelligence that is part of the very nature of mind." Another word for this clarity is primordial wisdom. So emptiness is not a void. It's not a nothing. And so Thrangu goes on and says that the clarity of mind can be uncovered and it can be developed. Here's a quote from the Uttara Tantra, which is a teaching that the Buddha gave. Quote, "The body of complete enlightenment is all pervasive. Suchness is undivided. All beings possess the potential. Therefore, all beings possess Buddha nature." Now, the body of complete enlightenment are the three Buddha bodies, the Dharmakaya, the Sambhogakaya, and the Nirmanakaya. The Dharmakaya is a formless body. We are not aware of the Buddha's Dharmakaya body. But on the other hand, because it is all pervasive, we are not separate from it. Tai Situ once said this when he was asked, is it one mind or is it many minds? And his answer was, it's not two. Which goes back to the Heart Sutra, speaking of negation. The Sambhogakaya is a body of an enlightened being that manifests only to beings that have experienced emptiness. These Sambhogakaya bodies we visualize because they're made out of light. So Chen Rezi Tara. These are Sambhogakaya deities. And then there is the Nirmanakaya, which is the actual physical body of the Buddha. But these are the bodies of complete enlightenment. And going back to that quote, it is all pervasive. Suchness is undivided. You cannot separate it. And therefore, all beings possess the potential and all beings possess Buddha nature. And I went to the glossary in the book for a definition of Buddha nature, and this is what they had there: the essential nature of all sentient beings, the potential for enlightenment. And there are a lot of different names for this, and this is not a complete list, but a few names for this enlightened essence are Buddha nature, enlightened essence, Buddha essence, Buddha potential, seed of enlightenment, basic goodness. Now, to continue, Thrangu Rinpoche says, we cannot rely on faith alone about us having Buddha nature, that we need to have some conceptual reasoning to back up our faith. And in fact, this is another reason why I chose this topic, is that what I have found is that people really have a hard time believing that they have this Buddha nature, that they have inherent perfection, that they have the seed of enlightenment within them. It's easy to focus on our negativities, our shortcomings, and our mistakes, and so on and so forth. So I really feel that it's important to understand this topic thoroughly. So to go into this in more depth, there are three reasons why beings possess Buddha nature. First is the Dharmakaya, pervades all beings, which I just covered. We all are already completely pervaded with it. And as a result, we can manifest it, we can bring it to fruition. Secondly, within the ultimate nature of everything, there is no separation between good and bad. That at the ultimate level, there is no difference. And this is a very important point to make. An example of this would be that our thoughts and our emotions originate from our mind. And we have negative thoughts and we have positive thoughts. We have harmful thoughts and we have beneficial thoughts. We have anger and we have love. They do not come from two different minds. They come from the same mind. So ultimately, there is no separation between good and bad. But that leads to the third point, which is on a relative level, even though we have the same potential, we have different karma, habitual patterns, mental conditioning, and we are in different places in terms of spiritual development. So there are differences on the relative level. And to kind of sum this up, it's good to talk about Milarepa, who killed 35 people intentionally, and then came to his teacher, Marpa, and through receiving the teachings and practicing and so forth, he was able to purify that karma and other karma from his present life and previous lives, and attain realization that killing 35 people did not keep him from attaining realization, because you can't destroy the Buddha nature. You cannot actually even alter it. So it's important to engage in listening and hearing, which is including like this Zoom talk. It's important to read, ask questions of your teachers, and so forth. Attend teachings in person when it is possible to do that. And then after that, chew on what you have heard and read. Contemplate it. Really examine it thoroughly and see if it applies to you, see if it makes sense. And if it does, of course, apply it. If it doesn't make sense and you don't, if it does make sense and you don't apply it, it's still not any benefit for you. It is a bit like having a headache and having a bottle of aspirin in your medicine cabinet, and but you don't take it. The third is to practice. And so practice would include meditation. It would include doing deity practices like the medicine Buddha that we did it was just yesterday. I was going to say last week, but technically today is Sunday and yesterday was Saturday, a different week. So doing these practices, all of this is important. If we can combine listening and hearing, contemplation, and practice and meditating, we will definitely travel the path. It is like the example of churning the milk and getting butter. What also is important is to be mindful of where your mind is dwelling as you go through the day. Being mindful and then working with whatever arises skillfully. And there are many different ways to do this. But the more mindful we can be as we go through our daily lives, the quicker we will progress on the path. So the next point of this teaching on Buddha nature is he has 5 categories of potential. And he goes through these because all but the last ones have characteristics that can hinder our development on the Mahayana path. So it's important for us to look at ourselves and see, do I have any of these faults? The first one is called the cutoff potential. And beings in this category are not going in a good direction. They're going in the opposite direction. And so there are 6 things that he lists that prevent you from practicing Dharma and reaching enlightenment. And his advice is, if you have any of these, eliminate them. The first is no dissatisfaction with samsara, perhaps even liking it. And there's no desire to escape. The second is no aspiration to achieve the goal, or no confidence in being able to achieve the goal. That a person could even know there is a better state than the one that they are presently in, but they don't even try to achieve it for various reasons. What comes to mind is the attitude of, oh, I could never do that. That would be so hard. I'm not even going to try. Kind of attitude. The third is lack of self-respect. In his words, we don't have an inner voice that makes you feel uncomfortable when you're engaging in non-virtue. And the next point is that you're not concerned of what others think of you. You engage in non-virtue and you don't care if others think badly of you. It doesn't matter. The next is the absence of compassion. That and he includes especially compassion towards people that have caused you to suffer. But he also says that basically this absence of compassion is that you just plain don't realize other people's suffering is the same as your suffering. Just as you hurt when you are suffering, other people hurt just as much. But this point really made me think of a flaw, you might say, or a fault, which is having a lot of compassion towards beings that are being abused by somebody else and having no compassion for the perpetrator of the abuse, whether it be a person that's abusing a dog or a person that is abusing a partner or abusing somebody in another way. And then the last one is the absence of repentance or regret. And the benefit of regret is that it keeps us from repeating the same harmful patterns over and over and over. It doesn't mean that regret completely cuts off your habitual pattern of engaging in harmful behavior, but you're able to, you might say, keep a lid on it and not engage in it so much and gradually decrease it. This is, you just don't care. You don't have regret. You don't see that you did anything wrong. So the important thing is, if any of these show up in your mind, this again is a good reason to remain mindful throughout the day of what's going on in your mind. You do what you can to eliminate them because they block your potential. The next category is the uncertain potential. And this very simply means that your potential for enlightenment could go either way. It could go up or it could go down. And it depends on a lot what's going on in your life in the present. He mentions associates, interests and hobbies, education, motivation. These things, of course, are going to be based on karma to a certain extent. So again, he says, be careful of the above list and try to have positive influences and not negative. So just to go down the list again, try to have positive associates, positive interests and hobbies. If you are learning, trying to learn things that are beneficial. It's good, if it's at all possible, to have a job that is, you might say, has some benefit to people. There are some that, of course, are considered to be avoided, and they would be things like raising animals for slaughter, working in a slaughterhouse, being in a company that does that, company that turns out war material, guns, and so on down the line. Interestingly enough, one of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's students, I'm not going to give her name, but she worked for an advertising firm. And this was back in, I think, the late 80s. When I asked her this question, I said, well, who do you represent? And she said, just watch television. These were the companies that she was working to promote their advertising. And so she told me that she asked Khenpo Rinpoche about this, that she was kind of feeling uncomfortable working for a company doing that. And he said, well, start your own company. And what she did is started her own company. And I believe what they did was a lot of consumer research. I'm not sure what else she did, but so, you know, it's not that almost everything has to be eliminated to be a positive type of work. And actually, with the COVID right now, we're realizing how essential very mundane jobs are, whether that be working in a store, providing groceries and other supplies, janitorial and cleaning services are very important, and so on and so forth, that there are lots of things that can be done that are really can be positive. The next is the Shravaka potential. And this is a term that it's good to understand because it's mentioned a lot in various places in Tibetan Buddhism. It's a Sanskrit word. So here is the three characteristics, or here are the three characteristics of a Shravaka practitioner. A, great fear of samsara, aspiration for nirvana. C, very little compassion. That they also lack courage and determination, that their fear gets in the way. And it is essential to be on the Mahayana path to have courage and to work hard for all sentient beings. The Shravakas are working towards individual liberation. It's actually quite self-centered. They are interested in reducing and eliminating their own suffering in samsara. And the nirvana is not Buddhahood. It actually is, you might say, a detour. They're going in a good direction, but it doesn't lead to Buddhahood, taking this Shravaka approach to the path. So he says, be careful and abandon any of these if you find yourself dwelling on them. A, great fear of samsara. That's different from seeing that samsara is full of suffering. But it's being overwhelmed by fear of samsara. And the aspiration for nirvana is an aspiration for a Shravaka to attain nirvana and leave samsara and everybody in it behind, which leads to very little compassion. So if you find that you have any of those three, then try to abandon them. The next is the Pratyeka Buddha potential. And these Pratyeka Buddhas are also on this path of the Shravakas, which is awakening for their own benefit only. They have these three faults of the Shravakas, which is a great fear of samsara. They have an aspiration for nirvana, and they have very little compassion. But on top of that, they have a very strong desire from past karma to be alone. They've come in contact with Buddhism in past lives. And in this life, they have this renunciation for samsara or a fear of samsara. They want to attain nirvana. They have very little compassion. On top of that, they don't want a teacher in this life. And they want to be alone. They want to be in a solitary situation. They do have a lot of merit, and because of their contact with Buddhism in previous lives, they do have, you might say, a certain understanding. And it is said that what happens with these Pratyeka Buddhas in the life that they do attain a certain level of realization is they start doing a contemplation on death. And it goes, well, what is the cause of death? And they kind of do a reverse engineering, and they go through the 12 links of interdependence and come back to the conclusion, of course, that birth is the cause of death. And eventually it leads to a certain level of realization, but it is not the full realization of Buddhahood. So the characteristics of a Pratyeka Buddha that we want to avoid are this great fear of samsara, aspiration for nirvana, very little compassion, no teacher in this life, very strong pride, and a strong fondness for solitude. Now, the last one is the Mahayana potential. And of course, this is the level that you want to be approaching the Dharma at. So the Mahayana is characterized by bodhicitta, wanting to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, wanting to have compassion for all equally, aspiring to that. It doesn't mean that you have it, but that you aspire to that. And also it is aspiring to understanding emptiness being no self, and that outer phenomena have no self either. Now, this is present in all of the nature of mind. And so this Buddha nature is called the innate potential. It's naturally present, but as I said at the beginning, it requires effort to develop it. If you're on the Mahayana path, you are in the process of developing it. And Thrangu Rinpoche stresses that effort, especially in the practice of virtue, is the cause of fruition. He uses the example here that the innate potential is like a seed that's placed in a leather bag. It's protected and so forth, but it can't grow. If you place the seed in the ground and water it and so on and so forth, then you have the potential of being developed occur. It actually sprouts and grows and bears fruit. So the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas, they can eliminate our afflictive states of mind. And in fact, the Shravaka, one translation of the Tibetan word is foe destroyer, that a Shravaka has conquered our afflictive states of mind, our desire, our aggression, our ignorance, pride, and jealousy. But they have not conquered the realizing the no self of phenomena. And there is this sense of pride of having conquered the kleshas. So even this idea of no self is not present usually with the Shravakas. there's synonyms of the Mahayana potential. The first, and I've talked about these, the first potential means capable of giving rise to all Buddha qualities. Seed, it leads to fruition. Nature, the gradual development of this nature will manifest fully as Buddha. Essence, the nature of this is completely unfabricated and natural. So it's superior to these other four potentials, this Mahayana potential. There's no chance of fruition with the cutoff or the uncertain. The Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, they don't realize that phenomena is empty of any nature of their own. Another way to put it is the egolessness of outer phenomena. That then he mentions 4 unfavorable conditions that keep the Mahayana potential from awakening. One is to be born in a realm that prevents one from practicing. And so those would be the realms, the hell realm, the hungry ghost realm, the animal realm, the jealous God realm, and the full God realm. He doesn't mention this, but I'm going to mention this, and that is that most human beings in the world today are born in such a way that they are living such a difficult life that it would be very difficult for them to practice too. And these things would prevent. And there are other things that could be gone into, but I'm just going to leave it at that, that I don't feel that this is just the non-human realms that are being talked about here. The second is that there's no natural inclination to practice virtue. And this comes from previous karma. The third unfavorable condition is that acting in a very negative way. And the fourth is having very strong afflictive emotions. So again, we want to be mindful of our what we are doing as we go through our daily lives, and what especially is going through our mind, our thoughts, our emotions, our moods, and so forth. And make sure that we are free from these faults, or if not, that we're working to reduce and eliminate them eventually. The 2 favorable conditions are to seek help from a Lama. And the second one is to have a correct attitude. And that is trust in the Dharma and then wanting to practice. And to sum up or finish up this chapter, he says there are signs that the potential is awakening. And they are A, the absence of hypocrisy and deceit, and the presence of great loving kindness and compassion. So these are qualities that their loving kindness and compassion we want to bring out. And we want to make sure that we are free of hypocrisy and deceit, or again, at least try to reduce it and eventually eliminate it. So to kind of sum up this, We all have Buddha nature. We all have the potential to become a fully enlightened being. The Tibetan Buddhist Vajrayana path is a very powerful path that leads to uncovering and developing our Buddha nature. We have all come in contact with it. We have received teachings, and we do have some practices that we all know how to do. Don't squander it. Life is too precious. Life is too short.